The new RS3 gimbal and Sony FX3 are a great combination. In this video, we're going to go over a few ways to rig them up together, why they work so well together, and a few accessories you may want to consider if you're going to order the RS3. The first feature I want to talk about is Bluetooth connectivity. Both the FX3 and RS3 have the ability to work with Bluetooth, and the reason that's great is because this gimbal has kind of a unique feature. You press one button and the gimbal locks, and that allows you to walk around and get ready for your next shot. Well, with the Bluetooth, you can actually hit the record button on the gimbal and a button on the gimbal to unlock, which allows you to use one hand down here to start and stop recording and to put the gimbal in standby mode. You never actually have to touch your camera to make any of those things happen. And while that may seem like a small feature, it's actually very useful in the field. All you have to do to set it up is to go into the Sony menu, which is much better on the FX3, go down to the Bluetooth option, turn that on, go to the Bluetooth option in your RS3, enable that, pair the devices together, and you are set. Once you turn it off and turn it back on, they will immediately work together. There is no delay, there's no waiting on this to work. It's actually one of the few times Bluetooth just connects when it's supposed to. Unfortunately, the Bluetooth doesn't allow you to control things like focus, ISO, aperture, shutter speed, and all of that. To do that, you're gonna have to use a USB cable. Fortunately, the FX3 is compatible with the RS3. Some Sony cameras in the past were a little tricky to get camera control. So to get started, unfortunately, you will have to disable the Bluetooth, but you only have to do it in the gimbal. You actually don't have to change any settings in the camera, which again keeps you on one hand on one screen on the gimbal, and it's very quick and intuitive. But once you've done that, now you have full control over the camera. You can control ISO, aperture, shutter speed, and focus with this. This allows you to use the built-in one-handed focus wheel to change focus on most Sony lenses. The way you'll have to set that up is make sure that the lens is actually on autofocus, go into the camera, and switch it over to manual focus. The first time we tried this, we kind of were a little confused about that, but it needs to be autofocus on the lens and manual focus on the camera. And then you go into the menu on the Ronin and set the dial to focus control. Once you've done this, it just works. You only have to do this one time, which makes it a feature that you would actually use, because any feature you have to set up each time you use your camera, you probably will not use anymore. So this pretty much eliminates the need for the focus motor if you're an FX3 user. Now, if you have manual lenses, of course you're gonna want this, but it's not necessary for most of the Sony lenses. And speaking of lenses, another great thing about this setup, and this is the only thing that's not really specific to the FX3, but it can carry a lot of different lenses. This gimbal has a lot of power. We can run a 20mm, a 70-200, our IRIX 45, all of which without any problems whatsoever. They balance nicely. Granted, they might be on the edge of the rails, but they will balance, and you can use these lenses with a setup. So there's really no reason to go up to the RS3 Pro if your camera of choice is the FX3. If you're gonna use a bigger camera occasionally, like a Blackmagic, then you're probably gonna want the RS3 Pro. Our friend Michael Tobin made a video about that. We'll link it here, and you can learn more about that gimbal. But this setup is fantastic for the FX3 and will allow you to use basically any lens you want. Another accessory they sell for the FX3 is a vertical video plate. It's about $50 and something you can order if you're going to do a lot of vertical video. But if you only think you're gonna shoot 2 or 3 vertical videos and you have the FX3, what you can do is turn the camera on its side using these mounting points that are mostly useless otherwise. All you have to do is remove the plate, put it on the side, slide it back into the gimbal, and then balance it. You'll have to max out the vertical adjustment to get this to balance, and it still doesn't balance perfectly. You're still going to be a little bit top heavy, so it's going to want to rock forward and back. Now, you could fix that by adding a counterweight, but fortunately this gimbal actually has quite a bit of power. So all we have to do is run it through a quick calibration, and even with a little bit of extra weight up top, it balances really well. I was amazed that it didn't shake or vibrate or act like it was going to mess up. It just works. So the reality is, with the Sony FX3, you don't need that vertical plate. Now, if you're gonna use really heavy lenses and do this often, it's $50. Go ahead and order the plate. You'll be better off. But if you think you're only going to use this every once in a while, just use the screws on the side of the Sony camera. Should work great. If you have a cage, you could also use that, but keep in mind, the cage is going to add more weight that will probably be a little bit above the center of mass. And that brings us to our next point. One question we get is, can you use the audio handle with the FX3? Yes, you can. While it might be a little impractical in a lot of cases, especially with this lens, so let's fix that. So to get this set up, you're gonna need to add a counterweight. All we had to do was use an NPF battery. Now we did have to lower the microphone to get this balance, and honestly, I never really cared for Sony's microphone mount anyway, so we actually designed our own, which you can find on our website. It's a 3D print. It allows you to adjust the angle of the mic and put it in different locations. We also offer it as a free download if you just want to download it and print it yourself. However, if you don't want to do that, you can just use a regular mic mount and lower that center of mass a little bit to make it balance better. A few drawbacks to keep in mind is you will not be able to go full tilt with your camera. You're going to run into the handle if you go too low, and you can't go too far back or you're going to run into your actual counterweight. But for run and gun shooting where you're just filming something live or some type of event and you're going to be carrying it up at eye level anyway, it doesn't really seem to be too bad, and it is a good way to get nice clean XLR audio. See, I don't know if you can notice the difference between this part of the video and the earlier parts of the video, but right now I'm actually using the Rode VideoMic NTG to record in studio instead of my usual XLR mic. If you pay attention, there's probably a little bit more noise because it's not balanced audio. So there are advantages to this, but for most cases, it's probably gonna be a little too cumbersome, so you don't really need to do it. But it's nice to know that it's possible. So a question for a lot of you is gonna be, do you want the RS3 by itself, or do you want the full kit that includes the focus motor and the extension handle for the back? For us, honestly, we could probably get away with just the RS3 by itself with the FX3, but it is nice having that focus motor. So that's up to you. It's $549 US by itself. It's $719, I believe, for the full kit. And then of course you can go up to the RS3 Pro, but for the FX3, I just don't think it's necessary. These are some of the things we figured out while using this combo. I would love to hear your feedback and ideas on what you would do if you had this rig and what accessories you may or may not want in the comments. If you have any questions at all about this combo that we didn't answer, put them down in the comments below and we will do our best to test it out for you and let you know ahead of time so you can make an informed decision. Speaking of that, we did have a question on Facebook about whether the focus motor is noisy or not. It does make a little noise. Mostly though, it comes from the lenses, but the motor itself does make some noise. So let's go ahead and do a quick test. That's with the lens and the motor. But let's take the motor off the lens so we don't have the noise from the IRIX, because these IRIX lenses, while they're great, they are a little noisy on the focus. And that's the motor just by itself. Again, this is right up to a microphone, so your mic's gonna be a little further away. Maybe a more practical example would be like this. That's about how far away the motor would be from the microphone in most cases. Hopefully that answers your question. We really appreciate you reaching out. If you want the full review of this gimbal and trying it in some extreme scenarios, you should check out this video right here. Well, if this was helpful, please give it a like and consider subscribing, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.